Hi, I'm Madeline Kay. I'm on the town council and I'm chair of the town's environmental committee. The town and the Kiawah Conservancy work together on a lot of environmental projects, and many of them center around the health and the renourishment of the marsh. So I'm here today with two of the environmental specialists from the Conservancy, Lee Bundrich and Kali Farah, and we'll start with some basics. Gentlemen, where are we right now?
So we're at Bass Creek Hummock Island on the east end of the island, so sort of right next to the confluence of Bass Creek and Center Creek, so pretty far out.
It is so gorgeous out here.
Oh, yeah.
How big is the marsh?
So around Kiawah Island we have about 3,750 acres of marsh, and within the Kiawah River watershed that all influences Kiawah Island we have about 13,000.
So of the landmass on Kiawah, what percentage of it is taken up by marsh?
It's about 33% or so.
And how much of our marsh is completely conserved?
Pretty much all of it. So we have,
good.
Yeah, that's great, isn't it? So we started in 2018 with a conservation easement to protect marshes on the north end, and then this past year we protected the rest of it. So,
like you say, that's pretty fantastic. What is it about Kiawah's marsh that makes it special?
I think it is the protection of the marshes that we have. We have the government regulations that protect it, but we have the extra layer of conservation easement. But I also think it's the wonderful dedication to environmental stewardship we have on the island. Everybody's very dedicated to ensuring we have a healthy habitat while we still live here. And I think that owes into the health of the marsh and everything. So I think it's just the environmental mindset of everybody here on the island is really very special, and it helps protect it.
And I have seen an uptick in interest on the part of the town over the last couple of years with the Marsh Management Comprehensive Plan and a variety of committees and subcommittees that we've established, working with you guys to do everything that we can to nourish and protect the marsh.
Well, collaboration is key. It's a big island, and luckily we have a lot of great entities out here that are all committed to the same thing, and that's keeping the ecological health of our island safe, protected, and as healthy as possible. Taking a step back to your question about what makes Kiawah's marsh unique, I think the other aspect of it is that the Kiawah's marshes do date back to a king's grant, and so we have a deed dating all the way back to the King of England, and so there is ownership over the marsh itself. If you don't have a king's grant, technically it's owned by the state, but that's another unique aspect of Kiawah Island's marsh.
So does that make it easier for us to protect?
It does. So with state regulations, the state basically has jurisdiction to make a decision on the marsh, but with the ownership of the marsh, there's a little bit more control about saying yes or no to whether a certain dock or bulkhead or something can go out into the marsh.
So tell me about where we are and what is this piece of land?
So this is Bass Creek Hummock Island. This is a fee simple owned hummock island by the Kiawah Conservancy.
What's a hummock island?
So Lee can correct me if I'm wrong, but I like to describe it as any high ground within the marsh that's detached from the mainland.
Yeah, that's about right, yeah.
And we see, they're very important from an ecological standpoint. One, they do help like marshes from storm surge that comes through. But just the other day we were riding through here and there was a beautiful doe hanging out right on the bank here. And so we do see the wildlife movement through the marsh and on throughout the island using the rivers and the marsh to cross. And these hummock islands act as a stopping point for them to rest, feed, and so forth before they get to their next stop.
And they get to their next stop by swimming.
That's right.
Exactly.
That are walking through the marsh.
Okay.
And they're also great for migrating birds. They love to use these areas as stopover habitats while they're flying south or north. So really great habitats, a lot of safe havens for a variety of species. So.
Can you talk about the health of the dunes over on the ocean side of the island versus the marsh?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that both of them are fairly healthy. The town has been doing a lot of monitoring through their beach management work, and we know that Kiawah's beaches are some of the healthiest in the state. And based on what we know right now about the marshes, is our marshes are generally fairly healthy. There's a few areas that could use some work, some more focus, but generally from what we understand, it's fairly healthy. But I think we're continuing to learn more about marshes and how they work and ways we can monitor it. So that's always what we know right now.
So, where the marsh is less than optimally healthy, there are projects going on. So, even in collaboration with the resort, between town, resort, conservancy.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's focusing on areas that are in the the most need, whether it be that people are losing area or there is a major concern about continuing erosion. And kind of some of the practices we're going to use are something like this, which is a manufactured wire reef to help build up the shorelines.
So these are going in at Mingo Point right now.
Yeah, a little bit larger than this one. So this is our demonstration one. Her name is Shelby. And this is about, I would say about 1/16 the size. So they're about 4 feet, but we're making about 140 of these with volunteer help. And we're going to deploy those out this summer. So
I think we already have about 40 of them deployed at our last crafting and installation over at Mingo.
And that will be part of the Living Shoreline project over on the north side of the Kiawah Bridge.
So this will be for Mingo Point, but that is definitely something we have discussed as trying to figure out the most viable living shoreline method on the area next to the Kiawah River Bridge that's experienced some erosion over time.
So how do these actually work?
Oh, this is a great question. Yeah. So this actually combines a lot of different practices, but so you have a wire cage right here, and if anybody's ever seen a crab pot that's been left in the water too long, you see oysters are creating on it, and that's generally the whole idea behind this. But it's interesting because this is a cage within a cage. So you have a cage right in here, and behind this you have this coir fiber right here, and it's basically just coconut husk. And what you do is you place this landward right here, and the idea is that sediment will accrete behind it, and it'll gradually accrete sediment over time to where the marsh can actually start growing some plants. And then the oysters and the wire around it will start to grow oysters and form an oyster reef, basically, a dual habitat benefit there. So it's a lot of practices into one, and it's kind of neat, and it's something that the South Carolina Oyster Recycling and Enhancement Program started working on for various projects, and I think it's a great idea.
It might be a good point too to kind of tell the difference quickly about the difference between something like a green infrastructure practice and gray infrastructure.
Yeah, I don't even know what that is.
Okay, so these things right here, while they're made with hardened materials and such, they're considered green infrastructure because they help the natural habitat to adapt, or they use these natural materials to help it build up. And that's the biggest benefit of those specific things, is that it works with nature to allow it to build up and adapt to different situations. But when you have things like green infrastructure, concrete, lumber, rocks, they don't necessarily adapt to those situations. They're hardened, they're stationary, so they don't allow that adaptation. So really, green infrastructure is about working with the environment and trying to help it adapt to different situations.
So we've moved, obviously. Colin, can you tell us where we are now?
Yeah, so we came out of Bass Creek, came out into the Stono River, out into the inlet here, and then traversed into what's called, behind what's called Little Bear Island. And so that is all the landmass you see behind us. The beach just in front of us is commonly known as Sandy Point, which is where you'll see a lot of boaters go and whatnot. But Little Bear Island directly behind us, it's about 150 acres plus or minus, and it's probably, I like to say, one of our most significant conservation easement areas to date.
How come?
Very similar habitat to what you would find out at Captain Sam's Spit. It's a very maritime forest setting. It's large in size, and it's undeveloped completely, and so we see a broad range of wildlife inhabiting this area, everything from bobcats to coyotes to deer, and everything in between. So it's just a very biodiverse area. It's got everything from sand dunes to marsh to hummock islands and so forth.
If you guys had a magic wand, what might you do that would really, really enhance all of our efforts toward protection of the marsh? Okay,
if we had unlimited funds, I would buy up every piece of undeveloped land. Just having protected areas that aren't developed, is our number one way to protecting the ecological health, by giving a place for the natural environment to do its thing. I think, one, not really talking about monies, but a wave of the wand when we talk about impervious surfaces too. It's not always feasible for the property owner because it can, there's costs involved, but it also can cause a little bit of a mess. But having pervious driveways, whether that's gravel or even just stone that's broken up, would really help with stormwater runoff. Also, I think a good point is we've mentioned rain gardens a lot. If we had all the money in the world to just help every property owner out here install a rain garden on Kiawah Island, so that's not just unlimited funds, that's unlimited manpower as well. Because they're a great, easy, I'll call it, green infrastructure practice. And what they're simply doing is they're taking an area that would normally hold water for long periods of time. You're just basically amending that soil to a very sandy mix to allow for that water to penetrate more. And so that recharges the groundwater and gives some of that water that hits roofs and other impervious surfaces a place to go. And they can be simple or they can be complex.
And along the way, that process, once the water hits the ground, hits the garden, takes some of the toxins.
It takes the toxins away. It certainly does. It filters that water before it recharges the groundwater. At the same time, though, you're able to put native plants in these rain gardens as well. So you're getting dual benefits. You're recharging the groundwater while also supplying nutrients to our local and migratory pollinators.
And about if we had unlimited funds, what we would do with it, I think, trying to figure out where exactly would be the best place to put rain gardens, where would be the best places to look at restoring these areas. And that starts with, working together to come up with a plan for the entire watershed to figure out what is the best way to improve the health of our marshes and work together to that end.
So from the town's perspective, we really should be focusing a lot of our efforts on rain gardens.
I think rain gardens or any stormwater practices, I think they all work together in their own way, and a lot of people call them treatment trains. So, they all kind of compound and they benefit from each other. So rain gardens are one practice, but, we have pervious driveways, we have rain gardens, bioswales, that all works together to that same end.
First off, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for your time this morning, because this has been a really, really good experience for me. I think it'll be a nice learning opportunity for any of our viewers. But before we close out, what's at stake if we don't do everything that we can to protect Kiawah's environment?
And I think, one of the things that we're kind of looking on the horizon is sea level rise and how that's going to affect the marshes. And if we do everything we can do to help that marsh adapt to those changing situations and allow it to thrive, then it will continue to thrive along with us. But if we don't try to help it adapt, we don't try to do as much as we can to protect the health of the marshes, we could see that it would potentially be lost. Maybe not in our lifetimes, but sometime in the near future. And I think trying to protect the marsh and keep it here for future generations, I think is something that, I'm focused on personally. But essentially what we would see if we didn't do anything to protect it is it would drown out over time because it just can't survive the inundation. It'll try to move upland, in some areas it will, but you essentially have a large dieback of marshes. And I think a lot of scientists are thinking kind of 150, 200 years in the future about where marsh is going to be. And marshes are only, these platforms are only 6,000 years old.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. So we're living in a very short geological period where we have this wonderful habitat, and it would just be we want to help protect it and make sure it continues to thrive.
Well said.
Yeah.
Thank you.